Delighted to be talking today from less than sunny Blackhill to the conference today. The Most Future Partnership has been involved in 2 LIFE projects, and this is one of the sites where we've done some work from our LIFE 2020 site, and many other pieces of work from other projects along the way. I'm stood at Blackhill Drink Point. Behind me is Manchester, land owned by US Utilities. In front of me is Leeds City Region and land owned by Yorkshire Water. To my left is Kirklees, to my right is Derbyshire County Council. We're in the National Park, but only just. The land to the north is in the South Pennines Park. It's all part of the South Pennines Special Area Conservation. Several SSIs. This area where I'm stood now, the reason I'm stood here is because this was one of the really big areas of bare peat. We have a unique and unusual issue here in this part of the world, in that most of our bare peat and most of our issues that we've got with our blanket bog environment come from its industrial past. So behind me was Lancashire's massive textile industry. Had we been stood here back in 1950, certainly 1940, we would have had our nostrils stinging from coal smoke, and probably the visibility cut down quite a lot by the amount of coal smoke blown about in the air. That killed off all our bog-building plants, and then a series of wildfires following that time created an enormous amount of bare peat, about 30 to 35 square kilometres in the Dark Peak alone. The reason the More Life programme has been really useful for us is it's brought partners together. So the boundaries that lie across the middle of this site must be 6, 7 organisational, county, local authority boundaries run right through the middle of this restoration site. So it was a responsibility of a huge number of organisations, not least the water companies. The water companies have been fundamental in the restoration of the whole of this landscape, largely through the More Life 2020 project and More Life that came before that as well. What is really important about the LIFE programme, as well as bringing partners together, is it's enabled us to do landscape scale conservation genuinely across lots of different land ownerships and boundaries of many different types. It's difficult to see any other ground stream that really brings things together in such a huge landscape scale as the LIFE programme is able to do. And one thing that we need to do in the future is that we need to make sure that whatever we replace it with as a country is able to do that massive landscape scale working, and is also able to bring partners together to tackle some of these really big problems that we've got in our environment. So the decline of nature, the climate change issues and everything else. The LIFE programme has been a major boon to that, and I think we'll all be quite sorry to see it go, I think. So both of our past LIFE projects, LIFE programme funded projects, have covered the South Pennines special area of conservation. That is Natura 2000 site. It has European protection. It's a European designated site, so funds from the LIFE programme are appropriate to spend in that area. So we have the first LIFE project picked out, if you like, the worst of the worst, the really critical areas that we needed to deal with. And after we had done that work, it became clear that there was mileage in putting in for another LIFE-funded project to do even more work surrounding those critical sites that we'd already worked on. Partnership has enabled all of this work to happen simply because the job is too large for one particular organisation to deal with. And all of the organisations they work with have got slightly different responsibilities. All of those responsibilities and all of the interests and energy out of all of those responsibilities needs to come together. So this is not just a nature conservation story. So it's not just the responsibility of organisations like Natural England. It's not just a landscape issue. So it's not entirely the responsibility of the National Park Authority or the South Pennines, Pennine Prospects. It's also not entirely the responsibility of water companies who are collecting water from it either, so that they couldn't be expected to do all of the restoration that was necessary. If we put all of those organisations together and resourcing collaboratively and collectively, that is the way to move ahead. The next step with our partnership model is to, I think, broaden that out. It's very clear that this landscape has a lot to offer, not just to the organisations that are immediately responsible for it, but there are 11.5 million people live in the regions, local authority areas that are put onto these hills, and there is an enormous number of businesses and business infrastructure, transport infrastructure that is all also very close to these hills, so depends on us being able to resolve issues of flood risk management and issues of climate change. There is an opportunity for all of those businesses that surround us, for instance, to contribute to the restoration of this site, because it is carbon, it's a carbon store, so all of the peat under our feet here is about 70%, 75% of that is carbon, which has been locked up for a long, long time. It would be good to make sure that that carbon continues to be locked up, and it would be really good to get these moorland areas, these blanket bog sites, back into such good condition that they're actively sequestrating carbon out of the atmosphere, and that is the end goal, to get all of these plateau areas of blanket bog back into active blanket bog condition, so they are taking carbon out of the atmosphere and turning it into plant material, which then gets turned into peat. So it's a massive carbon sink for us if we manage to work it properly. So we need to spread our partnership out so that we include organisations that up till now have not really been making a contribution or haven't had as much of an interest in this landscape as they probably have, especially if they've got a large carbon footprint. It doesn't look too remarkable to anybody who comes from most of the upland areas in England, certainly in Scotland. But this, 18 years ago, was bare peat. We're quite close to the trig point on the top of Black Hill, and all of the land surrounding the trig point around Black Hill was just bare peat. There wasn't any vegetation at all. We got quite excited 10 years ago when we came up here. We found a tiny little piece of sphagnum growing by itself. This was a eureka moment. It's good news for all of us, really. This means that we get better water quality, holds 20 times its own weight in water. So imagine our 750 square kilometres of the South Pennines, the Dark Peak, being covered in a blanket of this. Imagine what that will do for forest management, holding 20 times its own water in a carpet maybe this thick, over 750 square kilometres. You can also imagine the filtering effect that this will have over water running across the surface that then ends up in our reservoirs. So good news all round, really good news that it's coming back and it's flourishing. So this is a massive success story.
I'm Alistair Lockett and I'm a Senior Field Officer for the North Pennines A1B Partnership. I'm here in Upper Teesdale on one of the Pennine PeatLIFE sites, and I'll be talking about the Pennine PeatLIFE project. The Pennine PeatLIFE project is a true partnership project with delivery partners working together from local authorities and an NGO, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. The delivery partners are the North Pennines A1B Partnership, Yorkshire Peat Partnership and the Forest of Bowland A1B Partnership. The project is funded by the EU LIFE programme, the Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water, Northumbrian Water and United Utilities. Pennine PeatLIFE is a landscape-scale, 4-year project aiming to restore peatlands across 4 protected landscapes across northern England. We are restoring sites in the North Pennines A1B, the Yorkshire Dales National Park, Nidderdale A1B and the Forest of Bowland A1B. This multi-year funding allows us to work with stakeholders to plan and carry out huge restoration projects across a number of years. It allows for effective monitoring so we can understand what effects our restoration work is having on the bogs, and gives us a strong platform to disseminate the importance of peatlands to a range of audiences. Restoring bogs is great, but restoring bogs and bringing communities and stakeholders along on how peatlands play an important role in all of our lives and livelihoods gives a restoration the legacy that it needs and deserves. What also gives our work legacy is building strong, consistent and lasting relationships with gamekeepers, farmers, landowners and other stakeholders. These are the people who work the land every day, and it is hugely important to bring them along on the journey with us. Throughout our work with Pennine PeatLIFE, we have seen a big change in perceptions towards peat bogs and peatland management, including a shift from burning to cutting, bare peat restoration techniques and a need to tackle climate change head on. Sites vary hugely across the project area, including climatic conditions, altitude and erosion. For example, sites in the North Pennines in Yorkshire are higher in altitude and are colder, wetter compared to sites in the Forest of Bowland. Sites vary in erosion from areas of bare peat to hydrologically damaged but vegetated huge expanses of blanket bog. These differences require different techniques to aim to develop cost-effective, sphagnum-based restoration that is successful across all of our sites. Through Pennine PeatLIFE, we are also developing the mechanism to unlock private investment in peatland restoration via the Peatland Code. Using the Peatland Code, we have mapped the restoration sites and estimated that sites in the North Pennines alone cover 330 hectares. However, when restored, have an emission reduction of nearly 25,000 tonnes of carbon over the next 30 years. This is the equivalent of 3 billion smartphones being charged. UAVs or drones are becoming tools of the trade used in conjunction with peatland restoration. We are developing UAV monitoring techniques including sediment build-up behind stone dams, revegetation success and sphagnum identification, to name a few. We fly each of the Pennine PeatLIFE sites annually to pick up important differences. This also allows us to trial using drones to complete the required monitoring as part of the peatland code. This should make it quicker and more efficient. Multi-year funding, such as investment from the EU LIFE programme, is vital for landscape-scale projects such as Pennine PeatLIFE. Not only does it allow us to carry out huge restoration projects over multiple years, allowing us to adapt and plan our restoration as the work is carried out, it gives us enough time to get the necessary prep work in, including growing plug plants, which in some cases take nearly 2 years to grow. It also allows us to set up pre-restoration monitoring and continue monitoring the recovery of the sites annually, which is vital to better understand restoration effects and also to perfect our techniques on different sites. This sort of funding needs to continue post-Brexit if we want to learn, share and restore our bogs for the future and help us mitigate and tackle climate change. As part of Pennine PeatLIFE project, we work with other peatland projects across the UK, including Moors to the Future, Peatland Action and Cumbria Wildlife Trust. There are differences, but also many similarities where we link up, including sharing best practice, innovative techniques and contractor capacity. The North Pennines A1B partnership also link up with our European partners via Eurosite and Europark to again share and learn from each other. Pennine PeatLIFE and other EU funded projects using that funding as a springboard to generate lots of activity and interest in peatlands so we can build bigger and better partnerships such as the Great North Bog Initiative. Together we aim to bring a joined up approach to peatlands and restoring peatlands across the entire north of England.
Hello, my name is Patrick Green and I'm the project manager for the LIFE Welsh Raised Bogs project here in Wales. The project aims to restore 7 SAC lowland raised bogs sites across the whole of Wales to favourable condition. It's a 5.5-year project which will finish in March 2023 with a total project cost of around £4.5 million. Around 70% of the work is taking place at our 2 largest sites, which is Cwrs Carn and Cwrs Focknall, both of which are in Mid Wales. As many of you will know, Mid Wales is the largest area of lowland raised bog and blanket bog in Wales, so it's a very important area for peatlands generally. So as I mentioned, we've got some absolutely amazing sites within the project, and we hope to welcome you all in 2022 if hopefully the IUCN conference will go ahead in person rather than online then, and we hope to host you all in Wales to see some of our great sites and some of the work we've been doing. So the site you see on the screen in the large picture is called Carn at Tregaron. That's one of our largest sites, consists of 3 bog domes. The site in the top right, Roscoch, which is near Bilthwells, is a lovely site with a raised bog dome and a transition mire, and lots of interesting sort of management issues. The other main site that we have is called Focknall near Borth, which is on the estuary, quite a famous site in Wales that some of you may have visited. Our other sites, the large picture here is of Windee, which is near Crickhowell in Monmouthshire. Very interesting site and a beautiful location. Espen Bottom down in Pembrokeshire, Corsgoch, which is Trawsfynydd near Bala, and another site called Carmel, which is down in Carmarthenshire. So fundamentally, what we're trying to do in the project is bring these sites into favourable condition. As most of you will know, a lot of these sites in the past have been subject to drainage, poor grazing regimes, peat cutting,
and scrub inundation. So we've got quite a lot of work on to try and get these sites back into favourable condition and to get that water table up to sort of, within 10 centimetres of the surface for most of the year. So most of our work consists of looking at the hydrology and how we can improve that, and also looking at the surface of the bog, removing the linear, removing dense and scattered scrub, and trying to get suitable grazing regimes in order to encourage sphagnum growth. I guess our actions can falling into two main categories: the subsurface actions and the surface actions. So in terms of the subsurface actions, the raising and stabilising of water levels using low elevation contour bunding, a technique that's being used in Scotland and on Mears and Mosses quite extensively as well, using dams, peak dams, and restoring critical marginal drainage regimes. In terms of the surface actions, the main action is the mowing of the linear and the management of invasive and dense scrub, and also putting in place grazing improvements, particularly the sort of infrastructure around grazing improvements, and getting sort of land agency agreements in order to ensure that we get suitable grazing on these sites. The machine that you can see in the top right hand corner of the screen is a piston bully machine. This is adapted from a snow machine, a Peak Basher that you may have seen in the Alps. They're a German machine, and they have a large cutting head on the front. And we found this to be a fantastic machine in managing the linear. It's really, really good, and hopefully we can demonstrate the sort of efficacy of the machine if you come down to Wales in 2022. So, in terms of the bunding work, I guess there's two main aspects to that. One is the creation of new low elevation contour bunding. We have a video in a minute. We have 64 kilometres of new low elevation contour bunding on our sites within the project, and we've put in around 20 kilometres this winter, so that's 2021. The other aspect is the sort of reprofiling of existing bonds, and you can see on the screen here just an example of where we've trying to reprofile these bonds, taking off the high crests, which are more likely to have scrub inundation and cause management issues, trying to pack these down using an excavator, making the hydrological gradients shallower, and hopefully encouraging sphagnum establishment. Say tree removal and management, scrub and tree removal and management is a key part of the project, and we're going to be doing about 30 hectares of dense scrub and tree removal and about 400 hectares of scattered scrub removal within the project. So you can see on the left hand side, this is the sort of thing we're dealing with, quite serious inundation of scrub, and you can see there where the scrub is being removed. And we're hoping that, with raising the hydrological, raising the water levels and improving the hydrology of these sites, that they'll be less susceptible to scrub inundation in the future. Here, as I mentioned, the key part of the project is the low elevation contour bunding, and it's been quite interesting working with different contractors who have different ideas and different methodology for doing this work. The main bunding we've done so far is on Cwrs Carn and Cwrs Fochnal. What we were finding on Cwrs Fochnal, for example, where the water table is higher, is that we didn't need to go as deep into the sort of non-humidified peat in order to make really good quality and watertight bunds. However, at Cwrs Carn, where the water table is a bit further down, we needed to dig further down to get to the sort of non-humidified peat in order to build bunds which were, able to be watertight. So we're still learning, and I think a key part, a learning part of the project will be, having the right bunds for the right location. And I think that's something that's quite important and keen to share at the end of the project and hopefully before. So another large part of the project is the monitoring, and we have partners to help us with that, the scientific aspects of that and the design and so on. And they are CEH, so Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, the British Geological Society, and the University of East London, Richard Lindsay being the key person there. So I guess our monitoring falls into 3 or 4 main areas. We've got greenhouse gas monitoring. We have a greenhouse gas station or stations on Coast Carron NNR at the moment. We have hydrological monitoring across all of our sites, mainly using dip wells, and we have vegetation monitoring going on all of our sites, but with particular focus on Coast Carron and Coast Hocknell, the 2 largest sites. We've also got the advantage of having lots of historical information from those sites we can compare things to. I guess with the hydrology, we are trying to ensure that we have suitable hydrological monitoring within close proximity of our interventions. So where we put in new low elevation contour bunds, for example, and also similarly with the vegetation plots, we are looking to, see, obviously it'll be a long-term change rather than short-term change with vegetation, but looking to ensure that those are within proximity to, or various levels of proximity to the intervention, so we can look in the future and see how vegetation may have changed. We keep a very active Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram presence, and we're always posting things on there. So if you haven't done so already, please keep up with us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Okay, thank you.
Hello, welcome to this question and answer session. Thank you very much for those inspiring videos. We're joined by the people behind those great projects, Christine from Moors from the Future, Alistair Lockett from Pennine PeatLIFE, and Patrick Green from the Welsh Raised Bogs New Life projects. Thanks for posting your, and my name's Ben McCarthy. I'm Head of Nature Conservation and Restoration Ecology at the National Trust. So really pleased to see your questions coming in. Please keep firing them away. The first question is for Chris, which is, was the sphagnum seeded or entirely naturally regen?
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for that question. Good question. Hope you can hear me now. I'm not in the wind anymore. Don't need subtitles now. The site I was on in the video, Black Hill, is a good site for this question because we didn't know what we were going to do so far as inoculating with sphagnum when we first started on that site, and that led us into that piece of work. We'd put brash on that site, heather brash, and quite to our surprise, a little patch of sphagnum sprouted within the brash, so it obviously been brought in with the brash. We've been told for a long time that we would never get sphagnum to survive in these situations, these bare peat situations, so that was really good. That led us into that, and it led us to start thinking about what we do about seeding, about introducing it. The Peak District, South Pennines, West Pennine Moors has got very, very little sphagnum. So you can't harvest it from site and spread it around. There isn't any because we haven't got any. So we were faced with having to introduce it from somewhere and having to produce it at scale, which is why we got a big horticultural company on the go. And that has been a long, long process. So part of the question that's been asked really is, it's a long answer to do that here, but what I should say is that we've got quite a lot of documentation on our website about sphagnum because it's gone through a long journey. But basically what we found at the end of that journey is the most efficient and effective way of reintroducing sphagnum is to do it with plugs. So putting plugs in every couple of meters. Sounds like it's expensive, £1 a plug, where we've planted 12 square kilometres this winter. So that's, you know, a couple of million or so that we're putting in terms of a resource, but you get results immediately and it works. So we found plug planting to be the best way and the most efficient and effective way of actually doing it over the years that we've done it. So long answer, but yes, we are having to introduce it.
Fantastic, thank you. I think the next question is for Alistair, which is around how to manage the brash following heather cutting. Comes from Andreas Heinmeier, and it's really around the impacts. And if anyone knows or has looked at the impacts of what happens to that brash, does it deprive the system of vital micronutrients, or does it lead to water deterioration or eutrophication, or indeed reduce carbon storage and peatland functioning? Anything to
yeah, so we remove all the brash, all of our cutting, we remove the brash for restoration, obviously, so it isn't sitting on top of the bog. The other places that I know of at Geltstale are doing large scale cutting. They haven't got huge amount of monitoring in place, but what they are doing is vegetation monitoring, which is looking like it actually leaving the brash on is kind of reducing the heather growth and making it a lot more sustainable moving forward, so they don't have to go back to areas to recut them. For us, you know, I don't think very much is known about the impact of cutting and taking brash away. We are doing some monitoring in that, some vegetation monitoring, but any more than that we're not able to do.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on to the next question then, which is really about kind of understanding the impacts and setting it up in a kind of rigorous experimental, kind of adopting a rigorous experimental approach. And it's again from Andreas, and it's, do we have some control areas where we did not restore, so we can compare the impacts? And Chris, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks, Andreas. Good question. And within this question is a question about resources for doing things like this as well, because it's often difficult to get resources out of projects to do monitoring alongside the work that we're actually doing. We have left a very big control site on Kinder. It's about 100 meters by 100 meters. Where we've not done any restoration work. Curiously, we are now getting complaints about that. The whole of Kinder used to look like that. Now, because this control site has been left, we're getting lots and lots of concerns by what a disastrous, horrible mess this bit of Kinder looks like, and how's it happened, and when are we going to do something about it? So it's rather curious that people have forgotten the whole lot used to look like that previously. It is important because in that context we forget really quickly what things used to look like. And it's really good to remind ourselves this was an utter disaster before we started work, because we forget that journey that we've actually been on. We also do controls where we're specifically trying to find something out. So we have a bunding experiment trial on at the moment to see the effect of putting bunds in has on water tables. So because that is very specific, we're doing water table measurements in the site that we're doing the trials on, and then we've also got controls outside where no work is being done. Otherwise, the trial that we're doing is meaningless because we've got nothing to benchmark it against. I think a lot of our other work, it becomes a bit more complicated to do controls because we're being asked to deliver something under a capital programme, and we're not always then given the funding to be able to do the monitoring adequately within it, which would include controls as well. So I think arguably we should be doing more. We're doing as much as we can, but it's all down to a resourcing issue, really.
Fantastic, thanks for that. There's a flurry of questions which are coming in around monitoring generally. Does monitoring need to be carried out by specialist partners, or can it be carried out in-house? But also, where's the other monitoring question gone? Excuse me. How have baselines been established, and are we monitoring not only vegetation cover, but also the function of these bogs? Patrick, do you want to speak to that around monitoring?
Yeah, I suppose it's two questions. One is around the sort of, the resources for monitoring, and then the sort of whether you've got in-house staff who are capable of doing it. I guess with our project, it's a bit of both really. We've got CEH, University of East London, Richard Lindsay, and BGS is part of our kind of our sort of scientific end of our monitoring. And so they're heavily involved in kind of setting up the monitoring and how that's done. But we have a lot of in-house staff doing vegetation monitoring, and our own project staff looking after the greenhouse gas equipment, downloading dip well data and so on. So I think, perhaps teams don't have the wherewithal sometimes to actually set up a scientifically robust monitoring protocol. I think that's where the externals probably are most value. But certainly, in our case, our teams get heavily involved in the actual day-to-day monitoring.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think a question which we should all ask ourselves is, we've got a real whiz-bang project with a massive budget where we can do huge amounts of monitoring. What's actually going to happen when we get to the end of this project? If that is the situation, because what we're short of in the across the uplands, well, across the environment generally, is long data sets. That's where the value is, because then you can see change over a long period of time, and that is really what we need to be able to monitor baselines properly. So we've tried to design some of our stuff that we know that we can carry on doing with volunteers, minimal staff, if we don't have very much resource to do so. So we have a vegetation monitoring, which we started in 2004, which we run a campaign every late summer on the same quadrats throughout the whole of the Peak District, South Pennines. And we've also got a dip well campaign, which is now about 3/4 of its way through, that we run in early winter, and both of those are relatively simplistic in their technique, so that we can train people up easily to do those. The wealth of it is that they run on for a long time, not the technical details. I think that is more important than getting really technical.
Right, and Alistair, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, just to build on what Patrick said and Chris, like we do all in-house monitoring, all our staff, and we do keep it simple just with our skills. But I think monitoring is one of the quite important things that you should do as restoration staff, because by monitoring, you're going out on site every year or every 2 years, and you're learning what's worked and what hasn't firsthand. You notice things, and you can say, oh well, that's worked one way and that hasn't worked, and you constantly building. It's good for motivation, I think, as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I've got a follow-up question for you, Alistair, which is, are you able to link greenhouse gas results with vegetation communities to help reveal which vegetation types indicate active bog?
I don't think at the moment. So we are doing greenhouse gas monitoring, and we had pre-data on bare peat, and then we're looking at different sphagnum inoculation techniques. But at this stage, I don't think it's possible that we've got those vegetation communities developed yet. We've got a good cover of vegetation, but it's slowly kind of getting into bog rather than blanket bog
typical blanket bog vegetation.
Fantastic. And just
I'd echo that point actually. That you know, I think the changes in vegetation are going to be long term, aren't they? I think, you know, the hydrology, obviously, you can see fairly quick changes in the hydrology depending on what techniques you're using, bunding, etc. But vegetation is going to be, you know, trying to link that greenhouse gas data to the vegetation is going to be more of a long term game, I think.
great. And a quick yes, no answer, if I may, but are any of you tracking vehicle use on your projects? Because Harry Mack has started, would like to chat to you, I think. Monitoring fuel use? Yes, no?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Patrick?
No, we're not. That's good. It's a good idea, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, for your question. Okay, just moving on then, and talking about agri-environment schemes, and in particular for managing raised bogs in Wales. To what extent do you think, are you confident that provision is going to be made for rewarding those land managers? I think that's to you in the first instance, Patrick.
You know, from what I've seen, and nothing sort of concrete's come out, but there was a consultation last year. It looks like the sort of you know, public benefits for public goods thing is going to run through the Welsh agri environment, the same as it seems to have done in England. So, you know, I'd like to think that includes some of our highest priority habitats, i.e. peatland, woodland, etc., and that, you know, that landowners are rewarded for providing public benefits, and peatland can provide a huge amount of those, as we know. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. What advice would you offer to a lowland bog restoration project? Asked Carolyn Wolford. Top tips.
I think, well, get good staff.
I think it can go to all of you.
Try and employ good staff would be number one, and then make sure you've got sufficient budget. I think that's one thing we found. I don't know whether it's a COVID effect this year or whether it's just demand for specialist wetland contractors, but contractor prices, you know, seem to be going up. Just make sure you budget correctly in the first instance. Get your monitoring in place, as we've just discussed, yeah, try and involve local community as well. Put lots out there about what you're doing. Try to keep people informed and enthused about it.
So I think that's one of the messages that comes out from all of your presentations, really, isn't it? One, that this is a kind of complicated landscape, both technically, but also kind of politically, that there's a lot of different interests and stakeholders involved, and that actually this isn't a quick process, and that we need to be able to line up secure and sustainable funding streams. How do you think we might respond post-Brexit when this funding pot will be closed to us?
In terms of the life funding? Or
yeah, but you know, and whatever is or isn't going to replace it. How do we navigate these the years to come?
I think we've got to impress on. Sorry, I think we've got to impress on governments that you know, there's very few mechanisms for these joined up large scale, you know, landscape projects, and that, you know, to get a dedicated team together and have a specific goal over a defined period of time is a really powerful thing, and you can get a lot of work done that otherwise would take 20, 30, 40 years just in the sort of general run-of-the-mill conservation work by any organisation. So I think it's vital that governments understand the importance of these large landscape scale projects and having dedicated, you know, staff working on them. I think that's the best way to get sort of, you know, good results quickly.
Fantastic, thanks. Any other further reflections from Alistair or Chris? Go for it.
Yeah, we're really quite concerned, as I said in my video, as to what happens post life. Really, we have. We're in our second life program project, and it's a whopper. It's 16 million euros. where do we get the equivalent of a project resource of that size onshore? Really, there isn't any sign of that at the moment. So we really have to do some hard work advocacy wise in trying to make that happen. We've also, of course, lost the HLF landscape partnership projects as well. They've turned their process around and are doing things slightly different. So we've lost both of those big instruments to do landscape scale work over a long term. I think the saving grace might well be in natural capital accounting. That there are some very big companies, banks, insurance companies, others that now want to put large sums of money into offsetting their carbon footprint, helping with natural flood risk management, etc. And we're not ready for it, really. We've not really got a special purpose vehicle set up properly to run the financing of it in a way that we need. We need something that goes on beyond the peatland code to do that for us, some sort of banking arrangement. So they're way ahead of us in terms of what they want. We're running to catch up and are likely to accept poor deals because we're a little bit out of step with what we could do. We're not financiers, we're conservationists. Conservationists trying to be bankers shouldn't do that. You know, we need to work that one out, because that is where we may find the big resource to replace things like a LIFE programme is going to come from in future.
Great. Anything to add, Alistair? Or
no, like echoing that really. Like for us, like a bit smaller scale, but trying to tap into elms. If it is public goods for public benefits for public funds, then you know peatlands offer a wide variety of ecosystem services. So trying to tap into the elm scheme like we have done with countryside stewardship and HLS, then that should keep you know if a smaller program, it will keep something going, and it'll keep the message going as well.
Yes, I think certainly with the scheme in England, there's a lot riding on kind of election promises with regard to keeping the size of the agri-environment budget until 2024, isn't it? But thereafter, I think that it's all to play for, and I think there's real concerns that certainly the higher tiers of the new elm scheme will be insufficient to deliver the ambition. But you know, there are these innovative or new funding mechanisms coming into play, and I guess we're all going to have to get a bit more adept at managing these new financial vehicles so we can secure the long-term benefits that this work delivers. Great, we've got about another 15 minutes, so please keep your questions coming in. We've got one which might take us 15 seconds or 15 minutes, which is around burning, and it would be good to have your all three of your experiences around that. And the question is cutting always better than burning? Cutting sometimes scalp vegetation by not taking into account microtopography. And this is from Rosie Snowden. Who wants to go first on burning or cutting? Go for Alistair.
So, honest answer, we don't really know whether cutting is always better than burning, but I think the consensus is cutting is in a lot of cases better than burning, especially on blanket bog. There is an issue about ground smoothing and taking away those hummocks if you do have the cutter set quite low. But I think the more it will happen, and states in the North Pennines are cutting a lot more, and arguably probably more than they would ever do burning because of the weather restrictions around burning and those sort of things. So I think with that, it's probably only time will tell. But some of the, one place to go to is Goutstale, where they've done a lot of cutting for a long time, and you know, they're starting to build up a really nice picture of where the vegetation is going and how slow that vegetation is taking to come back. So, you know, even after 15, 20 years, you won't have to cut again. You know, that it's a one-off kind of restoration method, and then you can leave it to its own devices.
Great, thank you. Chris, do you want to offer your
Yeah,
perspective?
it's interesting how these questions have become quite political and quite pejorative sometimes, because of the politics behind it. The politics behind the whole issue of managing vegetation is one which is leading to making it difficult to actually get to decisions particularly easily without ending up in a great sea of suspicion and adversity. Unfortunately, it's about the whole toolbox, really. So we've got cutting, we've got grazing, we've got burning, and we've also got getting back to good ecological condition, so that the anaerobic wet conditions are actually managing vegetation as well.
Yeah.
And we need to consider all of those things together, rather than just considering burning on its own or cutting on its own or the others, really. And we also need to consider the uniqueness of sites. It's not possible to do cutting in large swathes of the Dark Peak and the South Pennines because of the degraded nature of the underlying terrain, covered in gullies, and steep slopes because of the gullied nature. You can't get a piece of cutting machinery up and down those gully sides and in there. It's also an environment where it grows lots and lots of vegetation, because it's far drier than it should be, and it's very difficult to get it wetting up. It's certainly got to be difficult on some sites, less than 50 years to get back to some sort of good ecological condition. So I don't think there's an answer to whether burning is better than cutting. I think if you can cut, then you should do. If you can do that, and that's the best thing to do. We have a green climber, a remote piece of cutting machinery, which when it cuts heather, it turns it into dust. So it's incorporated into the peat really quickly. It doesn't quite do the same when it's cutting over Molinia, so it's not as effective over those sorts of terrains. But there are questions about managing biomass, and managing biomass because the deal is a wildfire. If we get a wildfire in the South Pennines, the Dark Peak, the amount of damage that causes is horrendous. We had 25 square kilometres of wildfires in 2018, and we need to take a look at where should be licensed, even after if we get to the stage of having a ban on burning, because there's no other way of managing vegetation in those areas, and it's growing unnaturally fast, and it's supporting rhododendron and Sitka spruce and God knows what else that it shouldn't be in there. So let's not have a simplistic debate about one piece of the toolbox being better than the other. Let's do it on the basis of what the site needs and what the outcomes are that we need, and cover the whole lot. It's very rare we talk about grazing, because it's never in our skill area, isn't grazing. But we've lost that from a lot of the uplands in the South Pennines, because the hefty flocks have gone, because we've had to keep the sheep off to enable us to do our work. So we need a big debate about all of it, not just about burning, really. That corrupts it when we start talking about burning, or we start talking about cutting by itself.
Right. And Patrick, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, on our site, you know, we've cut pretty much exclusively, exclusively, in terms of using our piston bully machine to cut Molinia. I think, you know, it seems to be the right technique for our sites. You know, I think there's a lot of evidence around short rotational burning of Molinia and that causing Molinia dominance. So, you know, I think we're happy with the technique, we're happy with the way the machine cuts, and I think it's key to get a kind of skilled driver who can ensure that the cut is at the right height and so on and so forth. But I think it was Chris who made a good point around it needs to be seen in the context of the site and what you're trying to do and all the other operations. So, you know, hydrological operations and so on. So I think that's our aim anyway. We're hoping to use the hydrology to, you know, maintain vegetation and maintain the vegetation that we want, so that we don't have to continually cut in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And then I think, oh, look, some additional comments. Cutting, need to remember heather structure regarding, e.g., hen harrier and nest requirements, etc. Could apply same mantras we use for rush pastures for waders. Mosaic structure horizontally and vertically good, says Graham Barham. Thank you for that, Graham. And I think we've just got one more question, which is with regard to fuel usage in machines. Did we discuss how those who are accounting for machine use are performing this? How are you measuring your fuel use, I think is the question from Jack Brennan. Chris.
Under our LIFE project, we've had to do a full carbon audit of all of our operations. It's something that we wanted to do because we use helicopters like most people use wheelbarrows. So we were somewhat concerned that we may have a very, very big carbon footprint. And it's really interesting because they, first of all, within the first 12 months of the goods that have come out of the project, the carbon benefits have far outweighed the carbon cost for the entire project. And the interesting thing is that the helicopter use and using HGVs and using heavy agricultural machinery, which we do lots of all of those things, is far, far smaller by a factor of about a quarter than our office commute costs on the carbon footprint for us getting to the office and back, which was, it's actually quite frightening. You know, if you think of all of those people out there commuting to work and back, you know, our use of helicopters is far, far less than us just getting to the office and back in our own cars. So it was a wake-up call to us, not for the reasons that we thought it was, really.
And Alistair, is that the same kind of driver for you in terms of a requirement for your funding?
It is, yeah. I don't think we're going to do it at the scale that most in the future have done it, but we will be looking at different vehicle uses and including our commutes as well, which, you know, we've seen just from a big difference just from lockdown, really. You know, working at home, we've seen a massive difference of kind of less time at work and more time at home, really, and less miles, less fuel.
Great. Okay. I think that's the end of our questions. Can I just kind of reflect that some of the kind of responses that we've kind of you've offered up kind of reflect on the importance of kind of driving ecological recovery, the messaging from your videos around the importance of long-term funding and securing a strong legacy with the kind of the land managers, farmers, and other stakeholders working in those kind of landscapes. Can I ask you each to offer up some kind of final thoughts on where next post-Brexit with this pot closing, and where you think we need to be focusing on building new partnerships? Alistair, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I think kind of private funding financing should be one thing that we really focus on. And like Chris says, you know, conservationists, we're not carbon brokers, we're not bankers, and we need that that in-between person that understands both worlds to be able to make that work. And I think everyone's going to be looking for those people.
Fantastic, great. And Patrick, yourself?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, oh, sorry, thought I'd lost my
You
battery
can see
there.
you.
Yeah, I'd echo those sentiments really, that I think we've got a fantastic product to offer, and we need to look at all the options out there for funding, whether it be from central governments and or private, individuals and concerns, and just, but ensure we do this thing at scale. The bigger the better, in my view. The longer term, the better. It means you can build a team and build the expertise of that team and get an awful lot done in a short space of time. So big projects, and long term.
Big ambitions, fantastic. And Chris, yourself?
Yeah, leading on from big ambitions, really. I think we need to step out of our world and into other people's, and look back at ourselves and say, what do they understand and how do they understand it? And at the moment, we could be bigger. We could be bigger. We could have bigger messages that the public can understand easier and better, and that policy and politics can understand better. So we're trying to do that across the north of England with an initiative called the Great North Bog, where we're trying to stitch together all of the upland peat across the north of England. Turns out to be 92% of all of the upland peat in England. So it's a pretty big message. 7,000 square kilometres of peat. That speaks to government. It speaks in a big way to government and all its agencies about what we can do. We're not going to do anything really that differently from what we're doing now, but we're going to pitch it in a different way, and those sorts of things are what we need to do. You can imagine Boris Johnson getting really excited about something that's called the Great North Bog in his own inimitable style, and I'm expecting him to be on TV before long, huffing and puffing about the Great North Bog. So. Right. How we pitch these things, I think, is really useful. Do a marketing job on ourselves.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So I think our time is up. So on behalf of the audience, can I just thank you three in particular, and your partners and your projects for such inspiring work. It's been great to see, and thank you very much to the audience for taking part in your questions, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.